The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planted with Sara Pine podcast. I'm Sara Pine, your host, and today we have Bryan Gerber, CEO of Hara Supply, on the show. Bryan, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Sara. Super excited to chat today.
Oh, same. Where are you out of?
Originally, I'm from the East Coast, but I'm currently living in Nevada, Las
Right
Vegas.
on. Okay.
Yes.
So growing up on the East Coast, before we get into that, what was your first cannabis experience?
My first cannabis experience, I believe, was I was an early starter. The summer going into ninth grade, I think one of my older buddies handed me a joint wrapped in, I think I want to say zigzag paper. And I tried it a couple times and I was like, this tastes disgusting. And and then I was like so internal after that. It was a very, I don't know if I liked it. I don't know if I didn't like it. It was just like, yeah, I just had this, just super cotton mouth, to be honest. I was, what, 14, 15 years old at the time. So definitely started early, but yeah, no, I definitely took a liking to it because I think it allowed me to calm down, which has always been my issue. I'm always 1,000 miles an hour.
I feel that. Yeah, I think it's a precocious age because I was around that age myself. You just like, especially when you're dealing with like stigma with something, and you're precocious, you're like, oh, what's that
Yes. No,
about?
no one really in my family ever consumed really. Like even maybe my brother and sister did it a little bit, but I'm the youngest, so they never talked to me about it.
They had to be a good example.
Yeah, but I had a lot of like older friends, like that were like, sophomores in high school when I was, in sixth grade, middle school still, or I lived in a neighborhood that had a lot of schools in the neighborhood. So it was like a middle school, high school. And so everyone was just kind of mixed.
Yeah. Now, I remember reading that you had your first ideas about hemper when you were in school. What was cannabis culture like? You went to school on the East Coast, I'm assuming?
Yeah. So I went to George Washington University in DC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
So
what was the culture like?
so school-wise, very international. It was a lot of people from overseas, which it was between NYU, GW, and Maryland. And I decided to go to GW because I really took to heart your net worth is your network. And I really wanted a global network. And I realized going to University of Maryland would have been like high school, but 4 years more, you know?
Yeah.
But that was just right around the time when DC was kind of laxing a bit and the conversation was coming around. But yeah, I mean, cannabis was definitely rampant on campus and parties and, it was everywhere. And yeah, it was an interesting experience from trying to figure out, all my friends were getting internships at, Deloitte and IBM and all these major corporations. And I was sitting there in my dorm room thinking about, okay, how can I not go get one of those jobs? And so my last year, I was going around and saying, hey, what about, like a Dollar Shave Club for stoners or Birchbox for stoners or Loot Crate for stoners and just gauging everyone. And they were like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. Half the people said that. The other half were like, that's kind of stupid. I wouldn't focus on that. And so I got enough yeses to be like, okay, let's try exploring this. And this was right around the time where the category on Amazon really didn't exist. So you couldn't buy like like tobacco type products, right,
Mm-hmm.
off Amazon. And so I did my research. I figured out there was already like 4 or 5 companies already doing this, basically a monthly subscription service, kind of like a discovery outlet. And I quickly realized that none of them would be something that I would have bought into, right? I'm always very trying to not be hip, but I could never see myself telling my friend like, hey, come check out my 420 goodie box, or hey, come check out my burn box, or just kind of names that didn't really resonate with me. And it was just a lot of like tchotchke stuff that I wouldn't really consider like premium. And so the differentiator, and I basically, my last semester, instead of studying, I built the website and found out what raw rolling papers were and who to buy from and all these third-party companies, and I realized that the margins were way better than I even anticipated. And so I just started. My two co-founders were RJ and Henry, and I was RJ's roommate at college, and Henry was RJ's friend from Long Island, New York. And basically, it was we came to it's a funny roadblock, but RJ was like, okay, if we're going to start this, we need to buy like 3,000 boxes. And I was like, RJ, that's crazy. 3,000 boxes? Like, that's insane. Like, I don't even know if we could do that. And he looks at me and he goes, Bryan, if we can't sell 3,000 boxes, why are we getting into this business?
Good point.
And I said, great point. All right, run it. Let's go. And so we bought the boxes, we bought the inventory. I basically graduated May 18th, 2015, and we started June 1st, 2015. And we had maybe 30 subscribers our first month, nothing crazy. Half of them were probably my friends. And then over several months, I was like, all right, how do we scale this? How do I get to Loot Crate numbers? How do I get to Dollar Shave Club? Birchbox had just raised their $90th million in funding. And I was like, all right, are we going to be able to do this? And so I kind of came up with this like guest curated concept where it was like smoke like Snoop Dogg for a month. And I thought, okay, you're watching them on TV, you listen to their music. Why not buy a box that's exactly how they would be sitting on their own couch? And you got to basically, connect with them in a totally different way, right? And so I pilot tested this with popular YouTubers at first that were doing unboxings for cannabis accessories. And so my first one was this lady named Jane Dro. She would got to be in her 50s at the time. And I said, hey, Jane, I know you're unboxing our box every month on YouTube, but could you pick the items and curate it? And I'll basically give you $1 a box for every box you sell. And she goes, wow, that sounds awesome. So we tested it out. The customization was very limited. I think I bought a Uline stamp that said like Jane Dro approved or something like that. But it became this whole like phenomenon, like, she was excited, which really drove the traffic. And we went from like a couple hundred subscribers month 3 to over 1,500 subscribers month 4. Yeah. So we really hit the snowball effect really early on. I mean, we went from processing maybe $5,000-$10,000 a month to like 100,000 plus. Obviously, I couldn't believe it worked. I started working and going to larger influencers and celebrities. And so we've done a lot of like work with record labels and musicians. So we've done, Cypress Hill collaboration. We did a Flosstradamus collaboration. Partway through this, we actually ended up moving to California for a few years, which I don't know if you're familiar with an agency called Green Street.
Yes.
So Ron Mameo and the guys behind Hall of Flowers now.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were like, hey, we saw one of your unboxings on YouTube. Why don't you come out, meet us, and like we can help you break into the industry? Because we knew nobody, right? We were from the East Coast, which there was no industry, right? It was, very in the dark. And so the moving out to LA, and I was like, oh my God, it's like so open here. It's everyone's smoking. And you start doing research, you're like, okay, it's been medical since the 70s. All right, this makes sense, right? And so we met everyone and really networked the hell out of California and kept doing the celebrity stuff. But honestly, it was starting to get a little draining because I don't know if you've dealt with celebrity stuff, but it's exhausting. You've got the record label, you've got the manager, you've got the boyfriend's manager, you've got the,
and you got to go through all the right channels.
The whole entourage, right? So we said, okay, are we going to continue going down this? We thought an interesting business model was like doing the merchandise for tour for the artists. We did a few artists, but you couldn't end up selling a lot of the products they wanted because the venues wouldn't allow it. So we were like, okay, well, if the venue's not going to let us bring it in, then there's no real business here to be had, right? You know, you could bring in lighters, which, okay, you know, there's a lot more to this than just lighters. So we actually moved away from the celebrity curated stuff. And, you know, I took a step back and was like, okay, how are we going to keep this fresh and exciting and innovative for the consumers and keep them coming back every month? Because we basically turned your bong collection to like a sneaker collection, right? And we actually moved into more of these like novelty themes.
Mm-hmm.
So like for some reason, stoners and UFOs, they just mix, right?
Totally.
I don't know why, but people love UFO stuff, right? And so we started coming out these themes and basically complete molding glass into different characters and different things that you would find, you know, fun, cute, like it just makes you smile when you look at it, right? And, you know, you wouldn't be embarrassed is the other thing, right? I feel like a lot of people that smoke are, it's like this weird, like, "Ah, I don't really want people to know." And like if someone walks into my house and they see this like 18-inch beaker bong on the table, you're like labeled just like a stoner, right?
Yeah.
But when you have one of our bongs and it looks like a gummy bear or a, you know, a lucky money cat or a Chinese takeout, right? Or a UFO, everyone comments on like, oh my God, I don't even smoke, but I would buy that, right?
Right.
Or, you know, I would put that on my mantle or my coffee table or my bookshelf, right? Because it's just, again, that evokes that fun, novelty, you know, all of that, right? And so that was really the evolution of us starting to develop our own products. And so I brought in like a whole product development team, which I'll tell you was really difficult back in 2015, 2016, because who had experience designing smoking accessories?
This episode is brought to you by Fat Nugs Magazine, a global perspective of cannabis and stoner culture as a bridge to the rest of the world. Right now, you can join Fat Nugs Magazine, Beard Bros Farms, Freedom Grow, and Jailed for Weed in the upcoming Prisoners Edition and help spotlight current and past cannabis prisoners and their stories. Because no one should be in jail for a plant. Find Fat Nugs Magazine's beautiful print copies at your local dispensary, fatnugsmag.com, and on socials. Cannabis culture welcomes us all. I mean, outside of the basics, you had like your basic bongs, and then you had your crazy ass artisan bongs that were several $100s that you'd see at the cups.
Or several thousands.
Yes, several
which
thousand.
Usually were drug dealers buying those.
Yeah, those were well out of my range.
Likewise. So once I started realizing like the average consumer can't even afford the really nice stuff, right? It's thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds, right, for these really intricate pieces. And so I really wanted to bring that back to, you know, the masses and say, okay, you maybe, you know, I tried for years blowing glass in the States. It was impossible getting the price points to be where they needed to be. So obviously we went overseas to India and China. And obviously we got a ton of hate in the glass community for it. But honestly, when you're trying to manufacture 5, 10, 15, 20,000 pieces in a month, it's almost impossible because what I found is that there's really no infrastructure for manufacturing in the States. It's
It's
far and few in
gone.
between. It's crazy. I tried making everything here and there was really nobody. Like, you know, you'd have to go to the ends of the earth in Minnesota or, you know, like some little plastics factory, right? But, you know, tooling would have been 6 figures and it just wasn't viable. So I brought in, you know, these industrial designers basically to start designing our own gadgets. And really, I thought the whole ethos behind Hemper was like, you know, it's a discovery outlet, but we want to be the authority in coming out and designing and developing products, right? Whatever major ritual bed or, you know, organizing or, you know, a new lighter or a new rolling paper type or cones or, you know, whatever it might be, we wanted to be, when you thought of innovation and you thought of smoking accessories, you thought Hemper. And that was really the whole mindset behind what we were doing. And then when we got to California, we started getting this interesting reputation for just being like really scrappy at manufacturing stuff for like very affordable rates. And we were one of the first companies to really start sourcing and manufacturing out of India, where everyone was, and everyone still is basically relying on China for everything, packaging, accessories, you name it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we got this interesting position of like, wow, look at the hemper guys, that's very much how we were labeled. They manufacture out of India. Maybe we should explore that, right? So we started selling like basically paraphernalia to like a lot of the packaging companies that were, because in California the business model was direct to dispensary at that time, not processor grower,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we started selling to like marijuana packaging and Kush bottles and all the big packaging brands. And so we started diversifying not just the hemper business, but also selling glass to these companies, and then they would sell those to dispensaries or smoke shops. And I mean, we were basically just trading. I mean, I'm talking importing a piece for $6, selling it for 650, just to get the cash flow going, right? Because it was, I mean, there was no, we bootstrapped for the first 3 years, so from 15 to 18, and then we raised, so total we raised $3.5 million. But the first round we raised $1 million, which I was really only trying to raise 300 grand. But then I realized it was better to take more when you don't need it. And again, this was our first rodeo, right? So I was 22, 23 years old when I was figuring this all out.
That's a lot of money to handle at that age.
I thought they were crazy. The VC, we were coming back from a meeting. RJ and I are in a car, and we get a call from one of our investors, and they go, hey guys, I know we're trying to raise 350,000, but I think you need more like $1 million. And I look at RJ, I'm like, is this guy nuts? Why would he give us $1 million? Right? And obviously saw what I, we have these imposter syndrome, type things as entrepreneurs, and you don't totally have all the answers. You're sort of just figuring it out, right, day by day. So anyways, we took the $1 million and we started manufacturing a lot of other stuff. And one of these interesting opportunities, segueing into Hara Supply, was in 2017, there was a massive cone shortage in the market. And historically, there was, Futurola and there was Raw as your main bulk cone providers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, they had like 20+ week lead times. They couldn't figure out the customization. And so we had like Kush bottles. They said, hey, why don't you come down for a meeting? And at the time, it was Nick Kovacevic there as the CEO. And him and I, they tried acquiring us 16 months into our business, actually, which I said, thank you, but not yet at the time. So he became a friend and a mentor and just kind of an opportunities guy for us. And so we went down to their Garden Grove office and they said, okay, here's the news. We're trying to uplist on the NASDAQ. So we're getting rid of our paraphernalia division, which was like a lot of money for us at the time. But we have this other opportunity. We know you guys manufacture out of India. Have you heard of a cone before? And I said, yes, I know what raw cones are. And he's like, well, we have millions of dollars outstanding with these vendors and we can't get the capacity. What can you do? So I called RJ. I said, RJ, we have an amazing opportunity. They're saying they would buy 7 figures worth of this stuff from us if we can just figure out how to glue basically 2 pieces of paper together in a cone shape, right? And so RJ flies over to India. And at the time, there were a lot of like, kind of more or less sweatshops, to be honest, right? And RJ went to visit a few, and we tried to understand the process of making cones and the raw materials and the tooling you needed. And so we ended up learning from someone, and we decided to start, the thought was open up our own factory at some point. So we went back to Kush and we said, here's our samples. What do you think? And they said, these look great or acceptable. Cool, let's go. So I walked out of their office with $1 million purchase order with a 50% deposit, and that paid for the first facility.
Wow.
Yes, it was right time, right place, everything.
How did that feel?
And it was crazy because the other side of our business for Hemper, if we didn't have a 15 or a 20 or a 30K day, we may not be making payroll next week. And I was like, this is a stickier business on the B2B side. And the CPG side for us was up and down, right? The churn rates were high. Again, back to our earlier conversation about, just educating and talking to the consumers and being a part of the community and really, being involved as opposed to just sale, right? And so on the cone side, it was like, I'm talking to RJ, I'm like, is this real? Like, we just got $1 million purchase order for gluing two pieces of paper together. And as long as we can keep making these things, they'll buy them. So we opened up our first factory, started making, 2 million cones a month, 5 million cones a month, 10 million cones a month. And our original thing with Kush was they were supposed to be buying up to 75 million cones a month, which, to give you an example of that, is about 4,000 people making cones.
Wow.
By hand. And so God bless RJ for going over there, setting all this up and figuring it out. And it's crazy to say that I've actually still never been to India. And it goes back to having business partners that you can trust. And, I've got my domain here in the States. RJ's got his domain over there. And obviously our roles have evolved over the years. This is now our 10th year in business. So we've been doing it for a decade, which is crazy to think about. But so we started making more and more cones. And then we got up to about I think it was 20 million cones a month. And Kush was like, pump the brakes. And we were like, wait, why? You're supposed to be buying up to 75 million. Well, we're having difficulty selling or something, and this, and whatever excuses they came up with. So basically they breached our agreements and we ended up going out and selling ourselves. And so I said, okay, well, I've got all this capacity. What the hell am I going to do with it? Right? I need to start selling cones. We've got these people that we're paying, daily for making cones. And so randomly, I don't know if you're familiar with what the Champs trade show is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I've got a few friends that work there. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So 2018 or 19, I'm walking the floor and I'm Bryan with a hemper box, right? I'm trying to show people all of our little gadgets and everything. And I walk up to the OCB booth and I said, there was a guy there and his name was Cody. And I said, hey, Cody, my name is Bryan Gerber. I'm from Hemper. And we had to change. The reason why Hara Supply exists is because everyone kept saying, why are the bong guys selling me cones? And it was such a hard sell because everyone thinks you can only be good at one thing.
Yeah.
And historically, yes, I understand that, right? But they couldn't understand or fathom that we had all these capabilities, or we were just scrappy, new kids on the block, just trying to make it, right? So I went up there and I said, hey, you don't have cones. We just opened up our factory. I'd love to send you some samples. Long story short, 9 months later, I closed Republic Tobacco, which is OCB. And that was, a 10, 20, $30 million contract. And every year after that, I closed another behemoth, which was Zigzag and then Raw and so on and so forth. And now we manufacture for pretty much every major vanity brand out there. Steezy, Jeter. I do all the MSOs, GTI, Curaleaf, Terrascent, Verano, Kronos, Cresco. And so fast forwarding, we're now at 10 or 9 facilities. We have about 4,000 people rolling for us now. And we're doing well over 100 million cones a month for the market.
Wow. That's wild. I mean,
Yes.
when you think about you were saying earlier, well, I think people like to kind of pigeonhole you and say you can only do one thing. But diversification is essential and there's a sweet spot for that. What have you found as far as that sweet spot in diversification?
Definitely. So I like to say that, and this comes from, I don't know if you've read Good to Great by Jim Collins.
I've read some bits and pieces.
Okay, so there's two types of people in this world. There's foxes and there's hedgehogs.
Yeah.
And the foxes have shiny object syndrome, right? They're hopping around everywhere trying to find their prey. da 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 da. He stumbles upon the hedgehog. Hedgehog says, he senses the fox, rolls up into his hard shell, and says, "Silly fox, you're never going to learn." Right. And so what we realize is that one, even experimenting, not everything's going to be a winner. Right. And that's getting back to, Jeff Bezos talks a lot about this, like rate of return on risk versus rate of return on investment. And we realized that the risk profile for the cones was so crazy. We had never manufactured that type of stuff before. But the rate of return on risk was basically almost unlimited at the time because there was such a shortage going on. And so we said, this is a no-brainer for us to get into it. And so you're going back to what your hedgehog model is, right? It's the intersection of three circles. It's what are you passionate about? What can you economically make money from? And probably the most important, what can you be the best at in the world? And the intersection of those three circles is what you should be focusing on. So cones became one of our hedgehog models. We're the best at in the world. I guess I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about the industry, and we make money. And so really I've been using that lens to bring in other components or other inputs. And because I realized that the customer profile is the same person, it's just different input, right? So first it was accessories and glass, then it was cones and packaging. And so we started doing our own injection molding in India. And so we make, dew tubes in India, and we're able to do it at a more affordable rate than what China could even produce it at. Because a lot of people don't realize this. China hasn't really been cheap for labor in like 2 decades or so, or even more. And so we were really able to take that economies of scale and really drive that home with our customer base. And so just constantly we're assessing new opportunities and figuring out, okay, what's the longevity behind these, right? And I think a lot of our industry, and especially like the consumable side of like the THCA and all that's, D8, D9, all that's going on, is just fast money, right? And we really tried to not dive into something that was a trend.
Yeah, that's wise.
Because the infrastructure you build for that is so expensive and time consuming. And if you're telling me I only got a 24-month runway for this, it's just not worth it, So that's how we landed on cones and packaging and Hara Supply in general. It was just really like a lot of right time, right place, but really on the execution side, we delivered for our customer base, right? I always pitched us as a solutions partner, not a one size fits all. And I think people like hearing that because there's so many problems in the day-to-day operations of cannabis that if you just help a little bit and normal business practices go very far.
Oh, absolutely. Because some of the most basic things are very difficult for us or we don't have access to. I mean, when you look at even, basic advertising in our industry, which is the way that when we look at consumer packaged goods, that's how we reach out to the public. It's how other companies are aware of us. And it's, the constraints that we have around that is so incredibly challenging.
Oh yeah, and banking and payment processing. I mean, full transparency, I banked with Chase for a decade and recently got kicked off.
Really?
We couldn't believe it. I mean, the amount of money we've funneled through Chase, I mean, hundreds of millions. Just like that. End relationship, no reason. Sorry, bye.
No, but when all this stuff changes, they're going to come hat in hand and want your business.
Of course. Of course. I told them, I said, I'm never banking with you personally after we've been treated like this. And even though none of the other big four, Bank of America, Citi, Wells, they won't take us either. But it's crazy to think that we don't even touch the plant, but just because we're adjacent to it, we still have those types of issues.
Yeah, I know. For me, I have the same thing. I'm not plant touching. I never want to be because I like to sleep at night.
They always say that, and I got married a year ago, and
Oh,
my wife always says,
congratulations.
Thank you. And she's like, why don't you ever get into, cannabis or start your own pre-roll line or something? I'm like, because honey, your security goes out the window.
It
And I'd
does.
like to live a normal life.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so true. I mean, even for me as a journalist and an educator, I can't Stripe doesn't like me. Like when I have my strategic clients, they can't pay me through my regular invoicing.
So that's funny because obviously I was on Shopify when I first started Hemper,
Mhm.
which processes through Stripe. And the moment we went up to 50,000 a month in processing, I get an email. Who are you? What are you? Where did you come from? I guess we triggered something in their system. And I said, hi, I'm Bryan. I'm an entrepreneur. I just started this company, da 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 da. And they said, well, we will no longer be banking you. And I said, or processing your transactions. And I pleaded with them. And this is very rare. They gave me, I think it was anywhere from 30 to 60 days to go find someone new.
Wow.
And this is back in 2015. And I said, if you shut me down today, I am going out of business. And I've got people and payroll and this and that. And I guess I just got the right person on the other end, and they gave us a little bit of a grace period. But after that, it was the payment processing massacre. I mean, every 6 months we were getting kicked off something. And it wasn't even because we had high chargeback rates or anything that a traditional business would get flagged for.
Mhm.
They just wanted to basically keep driving up our rates. So they would do this, we're kicking you off. Just raise the rate. Can you keep us on? Okay, fine. We'll raise the rate, keep you on. It was this like constant like fight or flight thing. And we had one instance where we moved over to a brand new processor. We ran one of our reoccurring billing months, which was, over $250,000. They held on to it for 18 months,
Wow.
shut us off the following day. And we think it was a setup
Yeah.
just so they could hold on to the reserve. And we went, fighting teeth and nail. And oh my God, we thought we were going out of business. Nobody cares. That's the problem, right? The banks don't care. The processors don't care. They've got all their internal risk bullshit, that they want to, pin it on or whatever. But at the end of the day, they just wanted to hold on to the money. And so I've gone through years of this, I guess what we call discrimination, in a way, right? Even as recently as Chase, right? No answer, no reason. They won't even tell me because you're marijuana related.
Wow.
And it's funny because I sell to all these big tobacco guys, right? OCB, Zigzag, right? They've got no issues banking.
No.
They're
No.
publicly traded.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The stigma is crazy because it's like, you think they're doing their due diligence, but I think it's almost a license to behave badly. And
Yes.
it's not just in like, payment processing. I believe it's also in some of the policies that we're seeing throughout
Oh,
the
totally.
world too.
Totally. Oh yeah. No, I see, you know, like even as recent as Florida not passing rec, right? I mean, the amount of money that was pumped into that. And it just goes to show you that, even how red it is, it doesn't matter,
Mm-mm.
right? And it's, a lot of companies I know are major budget cuts this year because of all that. And again, the turnover in our industry is still insane. I thought it was crazy 5 years ago. It's still the same. Every company's restructuring, every company's letting people go. I mean, and they bring in these people that, again, from the traditional markets and traditional industries, but they they're fighting own internal bureaucracy just to get something simple across. And so oftentimes people just can't withstand all the bullshit that you have to go through to get to the decision maker or to get to an order or whatever it is. So it's yeah, the you got to be very strong-willed in this industry to keep it going. You
Yeah,
get beat down so much
you
every day, something.
you do. And I think a sweet spot with having people come in from other industries bringing their skill sets is good. We need to have
Yes.
the maturing and the growth, and they need to work with people who understand the industry and the culture, because it's
Mhm.
way more nuanced than they could ever expect.
Yes, totally. And I think that's why a lot of companies like dealing with us is because me and my, directors and VPs, we can talk on a super corporate level,
Yeah.
with the C-suite, and I can talk on the street level with the guy that just got his license,
Yep.
right? And no matter, you got to know your audience and how to talk to them and what they want to hear and how to position it. And, I think that's why a lot of people like working with us is because we understand what they need, right? And when someone comes in on the purchasing team that's talking, music to my ears, I'm like, thank God, like, this is going to be great as long as you can just stay in that seat. And you work so hard with someone for months and months, and all of a sudden, oh, I'm so sorry, I got burnt out, or I'm leaving, or I'm going back to the traditional industry. I've had that so much recently, actually. A lot of people leaving, going back to their traditional markets,
Yeah.
and it's not even from a compensation like reason. It's just from like the nonsense that we have to deal with.
Oh, it's tiring. I mean, people have no idea. You have to
Yes.
really love what you do to stick it out in this. Like I'm on my 14th year, and when people say, I want to get in, and how do I get a job like yours? I'm like, bless your heart.
And it's funny because they, you know, people like you and me were what, one of 100, one of a couple hundred, max one of 1,000. Why would we ever leave?
Right.
At some point, this industry is going to mature to the point where it's legitimized, right? And
Absolutely.
we will be hopefully rewarded at that point, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've friends who have traditional sales things and say, "Hey, are you hiring for sales?" I'm like, "Yes, but you have no experience, so it's not going to translate because there's so much nuances about our industry and the products and the positioning and the people. It's just like I can't teach that. Like you
No.
have to get your training wheels off somewhere else. We don't have time anymore to do that."
Oh, and your clients know. They sniff it
Oh
out
yeah.
in an instant.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Trust me. I've had certain clients be like, "Hey, they're fantastic, but I'd love someone a little bit more senior or a little bit less green."
Yeah.
No pun intended. But yeah, no, it's a very unique industry. It's exhausting, but you totally have to be passionate about it if you want to stick this out.
Yeah, you have to love it. You have to love it. I think you have to be a constant student,
Mhm.
you
Oh
know?
yeah. Oh yeah. No, I was having this conversation actually internally last week. I said, we are product obsessed, not customer obsessed. And will we see another decade if we're not customer obsessed? You know?
Well, don't you think? I mean, when I think about like when you're product obsessed, you do actually pique the curiosity of the consumer, because they're like,
Mhm.
what's the buzz? Why are they the people who are like just so immersed in this? They're coming out with all these interesting things. Like you're not necessarily okay. For example, let's look at a dispensary. People always
Mhm.
say gummies are like the top selling edible. Well, do you think
Mhm.
that gummies are the top selling edible because that's what people like, or because that's what they have to choose from besides like cookies and a few other things?
Oh yeah. So I think that gummies are number one because they're available.
Yeah.
And the best availability is availability.
Yeah, well,
Right?
exactly. And when they came out, I mean, you think about what we had for choices in a dispensary for edibles. I mean, let's be honest, some of the stuff was pretty gross.
Oh yeah.
So it's like,
A lot of the chocolate stuff doesn't taste good.
no.
And again, not saying I don't love the cannabis essence, but when I'm having a chocolate bar or something, I don't really want that to come through.
Yeah, or you
I
have to have like a good flavor combination that
Yeah,
dovetails well with that, and that's not always the case.
right. yeah, I don't, I mean, I guess there's definitely a large population of people who do love gummies. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, look at just Mars and Wrigley and, all the, I mean, there's so much candy that's sold in this country. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And we take that affinity from those companies. I mean, how many companies have gotten sued over the years naming something close to, Zittles or, whatever it is, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the that's the, you know, relatableness to the consumer, right? They walk into a dispensary, they see something that's familiarized, right? Which is really what people go to, right? Because a lot of the stuff is kind of scary.
Yeah.
Like when you walk into a dispensary, like, what's this concentrate? Like, is this going to kill me? It's like there's a reason why only what, I don't know, 15, 20, 30% of the customers buy concentrate because it's so niche, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You want something that you relate to, a format that you relate to. Even like when I
Yes.
worked in retail, I would have people who'd come in and they would say, I'm using cannabis for harm reduction, and I've had a bad relationship with other drugs, and some of this accoutrement and the concentrates are taking me back to some of my dark days. And I'm like, you don't have to
Yeah.
use that. Like
Right.
there are other things that you can use that will normalize the cannabis
Yep.
use for you, so you don't feel triggered by it.
Oh, totally. I mean, when you go to like here in Vegas, we have the New Lounge. So the smoking lounges,
Hmm.
even though half of them are closing already. Um, when you go up and take a dab, or they've got like a dab bar, I mean, it is so antiquated that they've got a torch there still. They don't even they make you put your hands behind their back. Like they don't want you to touch the piece. I mean, it's so awkward, right? And it's like, what are we smoking? Drugs? Are we smoking cannabis? It's
Right.
like, and actually funny because of all that, we're actually coming out with a new product in the next like few months that takes all the scariness away from dabbing. Like no torch and nail, no crackheadiness, none of that. And that's, I think, what we're passionate about, the consumer product side, right? So much more than cones. Cones are great, pays the bills, it's awesome, but it allows us to experiment with so much, right? And we've not everyone bats 1,000, but we've had some products that do really well and some products that flop. But a lot of times it's just because people don't know they exist,
Yeah.
right? And because again, there's back to your earlier point, no traditional marketing or advertising or PPC or any of these paid marketing initiatives. It's almost impossible to get out there unless you're going just viral from some meme type content, on social media or TikTok. It's really difficult to get the word out. Like, we've got the best products and here's why. We talk about this internally with the marketing team all the time. It's like, okay, we have great products, but nobody knows about it. How do we fix this? And it's just so hard to reach that cannabis consumer.
It is. And I think the subscription box model that you have is a fascinating way to be able to reach those consumers. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, like going back to the Birchbox thing, I had Birchbox when it first started. It turned me on to so many things that I
Yep.
wouldn't have taken, like, I wouldn't have wanted to pay for a full size something or other, It's like,
Yeah.
you
It,
try it, you like it. With your model with Hemper, it's like you have something, you have it out on your coffee table, somebody's like, that's beautiful.
mhm. Yeah, no, I think the Hember box was a great entry level product for people to test,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, 30, $40, doesn't break the bank. You
Mm-hmm.
get put onto, and that was kind of the whole idea, like the stoner community. It's like, there's like a joke that like every stoner knows 15 stoners. And the whole discovery outlet was like, we want to introduce you to new stuff that makes your session better or your ritual better or whatnot. And I think that's really why we hit that like growth really early on, was because there really wasn't anything that like lent to that, right, or aided in discovering, right? And you read High Times and Dope Magazine and the ones that still even exist, but they never really broke it down in like a real like conversational way. It was always like headlines, like California goes wreck, da, 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 but like it's just like all headline stuff. There's no like deep dive into like anything consumer facing.
Yeah, and there is a ritual to consumption, whether it's, getting your bong set up, or like back in the day when I would sit on my front steps and roll a joint before,
Yeah.
or maybe a couple to put in my case before I went out for the evening. There's, and you want, like, I remember before there were any, more sophisticated ways of using, different accessories, like going on to eBay to find old cigarette cases and beautiful
Yep.
ashtrays and lighters and things like that, like having a vintage vibe, something that was meant
Right.
for tobacco.
Yep.
But now you're seeing, these, multiple different price points, but things that aren't for that more sophisticated, I would say sophisticated consumer, but I think it's actually the majority of people who are looking to have a normalized approach to their consumption.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think we've been obliterated by all these different brands and packaging that, the drip logos, all the it's just like we want just something clean, simple, gets the job done. I don't need all this crazy foiling on the bags and all the, all the bells and whistles, the packaging, just something that's consistent, which I think is part of what we're really missing in this industry, is just being able to buy the same thing over and over again and have the same experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges. And I think what really turns people off from cannabis, like they'll be with their friends, they'll have an edible or a gummy, great, social, awesome, great time. They go to the dispensary the next week, buy the same product, they have the sweats, the chills, it's too much, whether it was the right same strain, or which is part of what the issue is. You can't really grow the same thing over and over again the same, right? It's every plant is kind of different.
Right.
And so I think the consistency behind it, and back to your point about, the majority of people are just looking for something, aesthetically pleasing, right? And I think that is the majority of people. And for me and like my business partners, I don't need all the craziness that you put in, like there's so much shit on the shelf and there's like, how does that sell? Like we did like a 7-gram blunt for a company one time, and they sold like, I don't know, 200 or 300 of them, but it's just like, I get the vanity, but it's like, that's what's pulling us back, right? It's just like headline, GTI does 7-gram blunt, it's like, I don't know.
I know.
We're losing like just and also one of the other things is, and my business partner Ty says this all the time, because we've been conditioned to buy based on THC percentages.
Oh, I hate that.
But hear me this. This is probably the best example of this. When you walk into a liquor store, are you buying Everclear every time?
No, I might use it to clean my bong though.
Right. That's how people approach cannabis. They're literally looking for the Everclear of cannabis THC percentage to walk out of that store, because they're buying based on milligram and THC percentage and price, right? But you don't want Everclear. It's terrible. It kills you. I mean, and it makes no sense why we've been so conditioned for this. Again, I think it's because of all the lack of ability to really be marketing, right? It's just like high THC, or we packed, 50 different types of cannabinoids in this one little thing. It's just like the consumer doesn't even know what terpenes are, or like half the time they don't even know what cannabinoids are. It's just like, again, to your point, there's no education behind any of this. There's so much like stuff that like the dispensary market could be like bundling with and doing educational seminars. And again, because certain markets, you do have that loyal consumer base, and then some are transient, like where I am in Nevada. But we were talking earlier about the stat about how 70% of dispensary clients are one-time visits. That's crazy.
Are you looking for a lasting, meaningful way to connect with your audience and highlight your brand? Well, listen up, because Planted with Sara is taking on new sponsors. Here's a powerful stat. 20% of listeners are more likely to support brands they hear about on a trusted podcast. And 60% actually look up that product after hearing about it. That's the power of podcasting. Planted with Sara has a unique draw. With remarkable guests, we attract and engage audience that spans all sides of the cannabis spectrum. Picture your message reaching these listeners time and again. Podcast ads are evergreen, meaning your brand stays relevant as new audiences discover and binge past episodes. It's a long-term investment that keeps on giving. If you're looking for a targeted, passionate audience with lasting impact, the right listeners are here waiting to meet your brand. Visit plantedwithsara.com to get a copy of our sponsorship deck today.
It is crazy, and it's ignoring a huge market, a huge swath of people who would use it regularly if there wasn't the gatekeeping around, like we were talking about earlier. You don't see the products. You're not having conversations about it. You're flipping through a menu and hoping for the best. And that's really alienating for a lot of people. Like when we got into legalization here in California, people thought it was just going to be like a total stoner fest. And they're, everyone, it's like everyone's going to be getting high. Cats and dogs living together, that whole thing. And it's like, no, what I saw was people coming in that were like, well, now that I don't have to have a conversation with my doctor about it, is this good for sleep? Can I help? Right. Can it help me with stress? Can I kick back? Like, would it be better for me to have this cannabis beverage than have like a glass of Chardonnay? Like, how do I know? And that's, I think one of the biggest things is that the marketing, the pricing, the products are all geared towards this demographic that's very, very small. And then they wonder, they're like, what happened? And it's like, well, I mean, I had a very famous comedian who shall not be named come ask me, hey, the stuff that everyone's smoking these days just wigs me out. What do you have that I can try that won't do that? And it's like, well, let's talk about what cannabis looked like when you were growing up and what it looks like now. A lot of the, other cannabinoids have been bred out. We're not seeing a lot of that. Try this 2-to-1 CBD to THC. He comes back. He's like, that was my jam. That's what I remember. And it's that conversation about like, I mean, I went to Arizona. I brought my 87-year-old mother-in-law to a dispensary. It was her first time going because usually I just would get her things because she likes high CBD to help with anxiety and her vertigo. And she was never a cannabis user before we had our conversations. I go to a dispensary. It's like there might be one CBD product there, and it's definitely not something she can use. They're like, oh, well, it doesn't sell. It's not. That's why we don't keep it on the shelf. They're like, it doesn't sell because you're not having the conversations. You're not investing in engagement. And engagement is such a huge part of shaping this market and putting us towards normalization. It's like when beverages came out, a lot of our colleagues were like, oh, that's never going to work. No one's going to want a 2.5 to 5 milligram beverage. I'm like, well, maybe all of us heady people hanging out here, we're not going to. But guess what?
They're kind of curious.
Or people coming back into it, or, our tolerances go down as we get older, or somebody who may like to have several beverages in an evening and want to pace themselves. I mean, we were having people during the pandemic in our garden that was our entertaining was hanging out in the front yard in the garden and making cannabis beverages. And people were like, I'd be curious about trying it, kind of going back to the conversation you and I had about finding a format that's familiar to you. Totally. And now we're seeing all these hemp beverages in all these states, and people are freaked out about it. But I'm like, this is a brilliant study on how cannabis can coexist in the mainstream market.
Totally. I know. Look at Total Wine.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the THC section now of all the different beverages, and we're over here being like, we can't even get banking, but somehow Total Wine can sell all the same stuff.
Yeah, that's it. And that's the only thing that I'm mad about. I'm not mad at, it's like, you can't hate the player. You gotta, it's the game.
Right. No, I actually appreciate the risk profile for whoever who put that through at Total Wine, because it is pushing us forward, even though it's an unfair advantage today. it's still pushing us forward for sure. And, to your point, I think first you kind of have to get around, do you want to smoke or do you want to consume something else?
Right.
Right. And I think the part of the whole alcohol world is that like pretty much alcohol does like one thing, right? It's the same alcohol in all these different beverages, right? More or less. For us, THC, I like to say that like the terpene profile is basically like the programmable data to the high.
Yeah.
Right? How you're going to feel tired, excited, fun, this, whatever, open, introverted, all that, right? And I think that people get turned off when they test things that it makes them introverted and they're like, I don't like this. It makes me in my head or whatever. And then they try something else if they're willing to, because a lot of people get turned off after that bad experience. They're like, it's not for me. It must be all the same.
Yeah.
And it's not all the same at all. I used to smoke a lot of joints growing, building this business. I actually, for some reason, I'm actually like allergic to the flower. I get like hives when I touch it. And so I moved over to concentrates. And I love 710 Labs.
They've got great stuff. Yeah.
The quality, their SOPs, everything. It's just great. And so I've found that, they've got a crazy array of strains. 3 work great for me, right? Whatever psychology, bio, whatever, just these certain strains work. And if I go outside of that world, I could have some heart palpitations, or if I'm, it gets me anxious, and so even for me as kind of that like alpha consumer, right? I still have to experiment sometimes.
Right. And you know that, like, but the average consumer doesn't understand the nuance of that.
No.
And it's how we educate and unpack that for them, is creating that safe container for experimentation of, your friend may like this, but your mileage may vary. And this is how you figure it out.
Right. And one of the problems is the lack of bud tender education.
Yeah.
Right. We look at these people like pharmacists, right? Or my healers, right? Like, tell me what I'm coming in for, I'm an investor in a company called Genetica, which is basically this AI onboarding process for consumers and dispensaries. And it asks you questions that you would be embarrassed to answer talking to a bud tender, right? For example, I'm walking in here today because I have IBS or diarrhea or something, right? You don't really want to have a conversation like that with a bud tender because typically they're not really that presentable oftentimes, right? And it's also very personal. And so, or you're here because I've got, crazy menstrual cycles and I need something that calms things down or, helps or something. Again, it's kind of like embarrassing topics, or I get no sleep. I'm up till God knows what time. And, you don't want to like tell a random stranger this type of stuff. We usually go to doctors who we've got rapport with and we trust their guidance. I don't trust any bud tender's guidance. Because
you should have come visit me back in the day. You totally would have had a different experience.
So, but what I think one of the biggest issues is these bud tenders are incentivized by the brands through spiffs and different things like that, which create a very jaded experience or a very like positioned experience where it's like, okay, I'm only going to sell him Steezy or this brand or that brand because I know I get $5 a pack, or I get $2 a pack, or I get 50 cents a pack, right? Whatever it is. And that's what a lot of the Canna Curious customers don't really know. They think, oh, get this Blue Dream, whatever, right? And they think they're going to have an awesome experience. They might not, they might, but if they don't, they're probably not coming back.
No.
And that's just a major lost opportunity.
It is. And I think that's also echoing the whole people bringing their bad habits from other industries, because prior to us getting into legalization, yes, we still did have people that were definitely on that tip.
Yeah.
But I know for me, like, I had a very intense training program for my staff. It was one of the best in the industry. Our retention rates were great. The biggest thing was, guys, you're not healthcare providers, but you are navigators. So not only am I going to teach you about cannabis science, but I'm going to give you soft skills with, positive inquiry, coaching, all these things so that people know more about themselves than they give themselves credit for. I'm going to give you the tools to draw that out so people can reflect and you can make recommendations and then create that safe space for experimentation for them.
Right.
And, you know, when we look at retail, a lot of times it's like, you know, people are undertrained, they're underpaid, and what they don't realize at a retail management level is that if you're not training people and paying them well, you're going to lose them. And then you're like, oh, training is a waste of money because I have this high turnover. And it's like, well, if you actually helped them with this, like understanding why something's important, hiring people who are actually engaged in cannabis, because 8+ hours of your life, you should actually know what you're working with, not being a doctor by any stretch, but being able to create that engagement. You do get people who come back because they understand that you become like almost a part of their community, a trusted friend that they'll come in and they'll talk to you. But we don't see that anymore. We see that, you know, you've got a board in the back where they're like, this is what we're pushing this week. These are the bonuses for these things. And it's like, well, how does that create a successful outcome with your consumer?
No, totally. And I didn't even know this until recently, but some dispensaries can have anywhere from like 100 to 300 bud tenders on staff. Like one location. I couldn't believe it. I was like, that is like an army.
It is. It is. And then you've got to wonder what they're getting paid. So these people probably all, with the exception of maybe a few who are there from the old days that are hanging on by their fingernails, everyone's probably got one foot out the door.
Yes. And there's probably so much, you know, cross recruiting from, oh, we're down the street at this dispensary. Why don't you come check us out? Right. And there's probably so much swapping of bud tenders. And again, you had bad habits here. You're going to bring those bad habits over here. And yeah, the cycle continues.
The cycle does continue. And that's, you know, I think when we look at like, we're in the medicinal use days, there were more people that were engaged in the movement in the industry in a way that was just richer. And as we started getting into these formula retail models, they just got pushed out because people were like, listen, you're talking to that consumer too long. You got to wrap it up. I want to see how many sales at your register. And it's like, okay, but then how many of them come back?
Right. No, totally. Yeah, there's always conflicting priorities for management, the bud tender, the vendors, the brands. I mean, there's no, and a lot of the dispensaries don't really work off, again, like traditional convenience stores, right? Or anything like planograms or setting things up properly. You know, there's very little that goes behind the thought of what's in a dispensary. It's just, we got to sell, keep going, keep the lights on. And I think certain markets are different, but like here in Nevada, if you had 3% of the market last year, you've got 1.5% this year. And you're going to have 1% next year, and 0.5% the next year, and 0.25% the next year. So I understand why a lot of the owners behind everything are like, just sell, just get it out there, deal, because they probably won't be around. Again, the consolidation, similarly to what happened with, you know, casinos here in Vegas. It's the same thing that's going on now. I mean, unless you're first money into a market, you're probably not making money anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It's changed so much. I mean, I remember like here when we started getting lots more dispensaries, like the first 420, it was insane because it was before we were so busy, and then it was like crickets.
Yep.
You got some people, but it was not the celebration or the rush day of like, you know, I'm coming in, I'm going to check out the specials. I'm going to check out flowers that you don't normally have, you know, special things that are in for the holiday. You know, all these dispensaries are, you know, doing their damnedest to figure out like, what's the secret sauce to get everybody to come visit me this holiday.
Yep. Totally. You're in California?
Yeah,
so
I'm in the Bay.
We did a Fred Siegel collaboration.
Oh, fun.
So we did this really high-end ceramic collection of bongs and accessories. and we did a 420 event at Urban Leaf up in West Hollywood across the street, we thought hands down everyone's going to show up. We invited all these different celebrities, this, all that. Crickets on 420. Very little traffic.
Yeah.
It's not the same as it used to be.
I wonder what it'll look like when somebody cracks the code on that.
I know. I don't know, because I sell to a lot of like C-store chains, and people go like obsessed about Buc-ee's and all these random like chains that have it's like a superstore, right? And it's like, again, you look at like Planet 13 as that, but like I don't even think Planet 13's turned a profit yet, right? And partly by design, partly not by design, right? And why are people obsessed with these convenience store chains, right? Or like Wawa sandwiches or Sheetz pretzel bread, or what's going to get people to come into these retailers? And I mean, it's funny when I talk to a lot of the MSOs, I don't think they realize that they're selling discounter weed, right? They all want to sell these $400 plus bongs, and I'm like, nobody is buying that. They come in with 20, 40, 60 bucks, 80 bucks maybe. And if they don't spend at least 60-point margins on cannabis and a little bit on accessories, you're losing on the customer. And, I'm dealing with a chain right now of dispensaries that they're like, please come in, reform our whole merchandising program. We don't want to deal with it. We don't know what to do with it. And it's just like crazy to me that like we have to explain to these people, why does 7-Eleven have a Slurpee machine, cups, straws, and lids? It's like elementary shit.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy to me. Like, and I'm not even an operator. And I'm sitting there explaining to operators why you guys have a Slurpee machine. You just need the cups and the straws.
Oh, maybe there will be some retail genius that loves weed too, that will just swoop in and like create something. I mean, you got to think. It's crazy. What
Even
sorry, go on. No. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, even the lounge model, right? The smoking lounges. Like I want to go hang out with my friends at a place that's got a cool vibe that we can get some food and drinks at and, hang out. But the business models behind it, I mean, I don't know if you saw Smoke and Mirrors, which I think was, I don't know if it was Thrive or one of them, already closed.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, you have to buy the stuff there. You can't leave with it. You can't bring your own paraphernalia. You can't, it's just like, no one's going to go to these places if that's the type of environment that they're cultivating, right? It's like, no, you come in here, you overpay for the same cannabis you can get down the street, and, you can't leave with it either. So wait, I got to consume an entire gram of concentrate here at this sitting?
No, you're not going to. I was just in Barcelona for Spanibus and going to the lounge there. Oh, you were? Oh man, I wish I would have seen you there. We did. I did a night of interviews at Choco Lounge. I was hanging out with Cedric.
Very cool.
Yeah, and it was.
Yeah, no, the whole vibe there is everything,
isn't it? Though
it's crazy how it's still illegal, but that exists there. And we did an event at HQ Barcelona. I don't know, have you been there?
I haven't, but I've heard good things about it.
Oh my, it's like the Soho House of lounges, right? And you can get, I mean, I'm talking tea bags and silk tea bags. I'm talking full espresso, just like good stuff.
There you go.
And it's just like crazy that we could all sit there. I can consume, I can buy, I can bring my own, I have my own stuff. And it's just like, if we could emulate that here in the States, oh my God, it would be a moneymaker.
It totally would.
The lounge licenses, but they can't figure it out.
No, and they're afraid of combining alcohol and cannabis. But I think like the fact that you can smoke a joint and have a beer in Barcelona, it's like it just has to do with education. It just has to do with changing, the social aspect, the social expectations around that. Because it's, yes, when you go into a bar, there will be people who overserve themselves. But
Yep.
by and large, that's few and far between, at least when you get past a certain age. And I think that's the same
Right.
thing that we'd be looking at for combining the two in a lounge situation. Like when I was co-chair of the legalization task force in San Francisco, we talked about that. We were like, at consumption events, how do we, because, you know, people who use, cannabis may
Hmm.
consume alcohol, but they definitely hang out with people that do. And all these people want to hang out together. And how do you
Yep.
create that situation?
Right. Yeah, no, and I'm so sad that they're not having Spanibus in Barcelona
Same.
moving forward. But I figured that everyone's going to go to Bilbao, and then on 420 they're just going to drive or fly down to Barcelona, because it's like, I mean, the again the and I don't know if it's like part like, does it work because it's a, walkable city, right? So you can consume, leave, and basically you're a couple blocks from your house, or hotel. And I feel like, here in Nevada specifically, I'm sure if you walk out of one of those lounges, you probably have cops following you home,
Yeah.
right? And it's just so conflicting of like, like I want to go enjoy this with my buddies, but I know it's like the rules don't work. And so that's why, I've seen you know, uh, like software startups coming out for like lounge software, and they're not successful because they don't have the right software. They're just using Dutch POS or something. And I'm like, that's
That's
not
not
it.
it.
That's not it at all.
That's just
And
another ancillary thing trying to be sold. It's not
yeah,
it. We
yeah,
we have to have better policies. We have to have better laws. I was
right.
thinking about like Europe though. I mean, Mary Jane is popping. It seems like that's
Are you,
the
are
next
you,
big thing.
are you going to be there?
Not this year. We've got too much
Okay.
going. Actually, I am probably going to be smoking a lot of your cones in the next few weeks because I'm picking up my kit for the California State Fair
Oh, nice.
competition, and I am a pre-roll judge.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, no, so we've actually been doing a lot of business internationally over the last, I would say, 24, 36 months. And Spain popping off for us,
Hmm.
Germany popping off, Netherlands popping off, even Poland. We've been doing a lot in South America, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, Paraguay. I mean, it's crazy how, like, when I look at how much, like, markets still left to take domestically, but one of my largest growth segments is international. It's
Hmm.
just like, what are they doing that we just can't freaking figure out here? You know? And like the Mary Jane Berlin last year, oh my God, the response to so we show up as Hemper at the booth, and the response is like they've never even seen some of our stuff. Like, oh my God, you've got a bong that looks like a UFO, or oh my God, a bong that looks like a gummy bear. And we sold through, I think, day two of MJ
Wow.
Berlin last year. Yeah, we didn't even we underbrought heavily. But again, it's like it's feeling like how, like, I know we're all waiting here again in the States, like, when is legalization going to happen? And I tell people, I do all the, these podcasts or interviews and stuff. And I'm like, if you are running your business based on regulation changes, you're going to go out of business.
That's truth.
I mean, again, 2015 it was supposed to go, 2020 was supposed to go, 2025 it was supposed to go. I mean, we're now coming up on 20, 15, 20 years of like waiting, sitting here being like, all right, cool. Like, who's going to do it? Is it the Dems? Is it the Republicans? Right? And it's just like, you can't think like that. It's just like almost on like a local level, it needs to start, right? And then that'll start trickling up to the top. But yeah, Europe has, I mean, even Germany, I think they just today legalized actual packaged CBD products that are now taxed just like tobacco.
Wow.
Yeah. And somehow they can figure it out. But what's interesting, I'm buddies with Simone Van Breda, who's
Oh
the,
yeah, Simone. Yeah.
yeah. And so we had coffee a few, like 2 months ago, and she's just running me through her whole life and being the coffee shop, the Netherlands coffee shop, like liaison, and like how there's just so many conflicting things. And she brought up a really interesting point. She's like, yeah, all these countries are kind of forming their own laws, but if you look at the European Union, they could shut it down tomorrow,
Yeah,
right?
that's real.
And she's like, the coffee shop owners don't understand the value that Simone is bringing to them. right? Being the advocate, the voice of reason, the voice of we're doing it right, you know, and you know, there's a lot of like, they won't let, sponsor, things to go to this conference to speak there. And like, there's one in London called Cannabis Europa.
That's a big
And
one. Yeah.
yeah, I know I was going to go this year because they wanted me to speak, but with Mary Jane Berlin, there's just too much like business on like the actual like product side. The policy is great. I just don't have the most time to advocate towards that. There's so much happening in Germany and the Netherlands and all these countries that like it's just like almost like they're like it's like feels like they're like a decade behind us, but somehow pushing it forward faster and better regulations, and just it makes sense.
Maybe they're learning from some of the mistakes that we've made too.
Probably.
I'm really excited this fall. I'm going to be heading to Iceland for a conference, and
Wow.
they're doing some really interesting things. Like they've been doing a lot of stuff with hemp, and they're really pushing to finally have medical use there, and then looking at what happens with adult use. And they already have, tourism for psychedelics, and of course, just Iceland.
Right.
It's yeah.
The Blue Lagoons look amazing.
Right?
Yeah, I see people on social media posting that all the time. I'm like, oh my God, it's like just natural, like warm, baths, right? Or lagoons,
Yeah.
nuts.
That and weed, I mean,
Right. Frankly, there's no stopping it.
no, it's the genie's out of the bottle. There is
Right.
no stopping it. And, just gosh, we talked a little longer than I expected, and I could talk to you all day. You're so much fun. But when you look at the future, like just kind of wrapping up, what are some things that you're excited and hopeful for?
I think the overall acceptance of being in business and being a consumer at the same time, and not having, that corporate mindset of like, there's just no way he could run a successful business, or there's no way he could do both, right? Or, it's like whether I'm consuming just for sleep or, whatever, I joke, I say everyone, medicates recreationally these days, right? But no, I think I'm excited for the consolidation, because I think that will lend to just more professionalism and better regulations, and just kind of clearing the path for all the bad actors that I think we have in our industry. And so that's definitely exciting for the future. And just internationally, what we just discussed. I mean, you're telling me I could fly to Japan maybe in the next decade and consume and do business and vacation. I mean, that's so exciting, right? That you don't have to be afraid of consuming in those countries if you're going to go to jail, if you're getting the death penalty. I mean, and half the time, like, okay, maybe I've got, I don't know, let's say you've got like 10 grams of concentrate in your house or something, right? Are you going to jail because you've got like over the daily limit? It's like you don't even know, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so weird. Like we live in this like just like weird bubble, right? And to your point, the cat's out of the bag, and there's really no stopping it. But it's just like there's so much more to do. It's like everyone's like, oh, we're in cannabis 3.0 or 2.0. I'm like, we're still in 1.0.
Yeah, we're
It's so
nascent.
basic still. Yeah.
Yeah, we've just gotten out of the time of having a candy bar in a baggie with a cheap label.
Yes. And there's still some of those on the shelf.
It's true. Yeah, different markets have different things. I don't touch those.
No, me neither.
Well, for people who want to subscribe to the box, check out more about the company, see what you're doing, how do they do that?
Yeah, so hemper.com for anything of the smoking accessory side or the subscription box. And then if you're an operator or dispensary or something like that, harasupply.com. And feel free to reach out to me at brian@harasupply.com, and I will guide you and help however I can.
Thank you so much, Bryan. I had so much fun talking to you, and you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Sarah. I really had a great time today.
Thank you. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn, we are there. So join us, and until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.